Hey guys, how you doing?
What's going on?
You've been all over this story for a while. You know the people here in the DMV are freaking out. What's kind of the latest that you're hearing with this Terry situation?
Well, I checked with somebody last night after he had decided to hold out, and I think his feeling was, "Hey, I've been serious this whole time, so why should I cave now and show up?" So it's interesting with these holdouts, and I've been through these before, where you hear players say a lot that, or people around the players say, "Well, hey, they're dug in, they're gonna stay away or miss games," and you kind of have to judge, well, did they mean it or not? I think Terry means it. We'll see what happens over time, and minds can change. And I think it's more like the Washington has been in touch more over the last few days, which is good.
You believe that to be true? Because we have a guy here that works here, and he says, I don't believe it, because if there were real talks, he'd maybe hold in at least. There'd be some movement.
Well, I think you're right. It's semantics a little bit as far as what real talks are. I think if the talks were truly meaningful or going in a positive direction toward a deal, I do think he would be there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that they've increased the number of discussions they've had of late. Like Washington's been in touch.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know how meaningful the conversations were. They clearly weren't good enough to get them there. So it is semantics a little bit. But over the last few days, Washington has been in touch more, and they've had talks more so than they were, say, a couple weeks ago. So if there's a positive, it's that, I guess.
Jeremy, are you surprised that the Washington front office has taken this stance with Terry McLaurin, a team leader, clearly a valued player, that they're drawing this line in the sand with one of their most valued players? Are you surprised at all by that?
Well, I would say I'm mildly surprised, but I'm not in the sense that these third contracts are tricky no matter how good a player is. They just are. TJ Watt, I would probably call an exception, Watt and Myles Garrett, because they're both 1 and 2 in the pass rusher market, and it's a premier position and they're premier players. Terry obviously is a very good elite receiver, but I think some teams put a cap a little bit on what they're willing to do on third contracts, and there really is sticker shock league-wide at some of these positions, the way they've grown financially, where receiver $30 million a year, nobody sniffs at anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, could Washington change its plan, especially if Terry continues to sit out? Certainly, but it sounds like coming into all this, or at least coming into the summer, they were willing to acknowledge a slight increase on where Terry was, but not the market, which is $30 million and above.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you have any, and maybe you're just guessing, Jeremy, but any chance you can guess on what the gap is? I mean, he's currently making about 23, and like you said, the big guys are making mid-30s, and I wouldn't pay Terry McLaurin mid-30s either. I like him, but I wouldn't pay him that much because he's he'll be 30. But any idea what the gap is? What do you think Terry's asking for, and what do you think Adam is offering?
Well, it's not a guess. It is based on my talks, but it's
okay, good.
But people aren't spelling out an exact gap, so I don't know the exact gap is, say, $5 million a year, for instance. But based on what I've gathered, if it was something like that, that would not surprise me. Like it's.
Are they under 30?
I don't even think.
Is that your guess?
They're in a place where Washington's making offers and counter offers right now. That's part of the problem. I don't think they're that far down the road. It's more like, here's where we are, here's where you are. So I don't know if there's even like a realistic gap that exists right now, because I don't think they've gotten that far.
Oh.
So they're still like at their preliminary offers, essentially.
Yeah, I just think it hasn't intensified to that point. It's been some talks of hey, here's what we would be comfortable with. Okay, well, here's the market, and here's what Terry's accomplished in that market. So we got a problem. That's kind of where it's at. So I don't know that it's even got off the ground in that way. But from what I was told, I think Washington was willing to do what some would consider a slight increase off of where he was. So if he's at 23, they'd be willing to do, say, 25, for example. And Terry's probably saying, hey, the market's 30 plus. So where are we at here? So that's essentially the gap. I'm not going to put an exact number on it, but that's kind of what you're looking at.
All right, so I'm looking at Buddy Baker's client lists, and I'm assuming this is up to date. Maybe it's not. Seems to me by far Terry's his biggest client, right? By far. Is there any sense that this is a little bit like out of his realm? I mean, he's got a lot of clients. It's not his first rodeo, but I mean, this would be, maybe I'm wrong, by far his biggest deal, and that there's like, maybe there's a personality rift, and the Commanders, they just don't respect this guy. I you know what I mean? There's something going on there.
I don't think it's that. Buddy Baker's a veteran agent, had a lot of clients. Is Terry his biggest client? I believe so. But I don't think that's the case. Now, in these things, sometimes it's a matter of what kind of chemistry or trust a team has with a player agent. I don't think that's the problem in this case. I think it's more, the player and the player's agent are taking an aggressive approach, Mm-hmm. And look, if you're 29 years old and you're a premier player, you're going to get one last crack at the apple, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to try to maximize that best you can, especially when it does become principle a little bit, I think, for the player, when you can look at Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins getting money around $30 million a year, and you're like, well, I'm just better than those guys. It just is what it is. I don't care if I'm 29. So that's just me using an example, but I think he's looking at the market saying that. Garrett Wilson, I think more than half the league would argue that Terry McLaurin is better than Garrett Wilson. Now, Garrett Wilson's on his second contract. He's a lot younger.
Right.
I understand. And he's got kind of a unique skill set, but Terry overall, all around, is a better player.
What about, have they gotten to the point where they're negotiating term? Or are they still stuck on AAV? Because a lot of us have assumed from afar, without having any knowledge, well, they must be arguing about term because, he's older. They don't want to give him, 3-4 years. And, he wants, obviously, last crack at the apple. But, they can't possibly be debating what his value is. You're saying they're even debating his actual value. Doesn't even sound like they're even talking about term.
I'm sure that they have. I'm sure that they've at least kicked that around,
Yeah.
I just don't think it's at a point where they're throwing offers and counter offers around. That's all. I just think it's the lack of, from what I was told, the lack of meaningful discussions to get to that point haven't really been occurring, although there has been a slight uptick of late.
Yeah.
Just as camp has approached, that created at least some urgency to try to talk through it more. But I just think the issue is, in the big picture, what do you think of me? What's your value of me? Those are some of the core issues, as opposed to average per year and all that. Now, guaranteed money is always going to be a sticking point with these things. It was with TJ Watt's deal, some of the recent ones. Mm-hmm. That's always the number one thing. So they're going to have to work through that in a big way.
Talking to Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, he's excellent. What do you think the chances of a trade are? I mean, would you kind of put that way down the list, and you still think a deal will get done, or do you think it's a possibility? I don't. It's just my opinion. I don't. But do you think it's a possibility?
So I checked with somebody with the team pretty recently, do you believe trading McLaurin is an option? I was told pretty firmly no. So as of now, I'm rolling with that. These things do change. Moods can change. Right now we see Trey Hendrickson with the Bengals. He's in Florida training right now. These things can get contentious and ugly. And so players can get fed up, or teams can get fed up. So I always leave a little bit of a small percentage for, stances to change or goalposts to move and all that. But I don't believe they're going to trade Terry McLaurin. No. And this is a team that's right there in their window. They got better this offseason. They need McLaurin. It's just, there's no other way around it. You can't go into the season with Deebo Samuel as your number one receiver. The reason why, that's not a knock on Deebo, but the reason why they got him is so he could be a complementary piece in the offense, a do-it-all receiver alongside Terry. So they're going to have to work something out. I don't sense that there'd be a market for him. But, even these trades are really tough to do now over the last year, especially with the money increasing the way it has. Even premier players, we were talking about TJ Watt a month ago. Are they going to trade TJ Watt? Well, no matter how good he is, are you going to give up a first-round pick and more to get a player you have to turn around and pay $40 million a year? So these markets and these sticker shock numbers have decreased the chances to trade star players, at least in the short term. So that's a factor as well.
Jeremy, what do you think is going through the brains of guys like you mentioned Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil, guys that Peters traded for? They're watching this from the outside thinking, well, if Terry's been here for several years and is having trouble getting a deal, like, what are my chances of getting a deal when my deal's up? We know that Deebo's in a contract year. We know that Tunsil wants to redo his deal probably in the next year or year and a half. What do you think the shockwaves are going through the locker room from the McLaurin holdout?
Yeah, if it's an issue, I mean, it is an issue a team has to deal with. You know, you have a lot of players you're going to have to pay down the road. Now, I feel like Washington's in a decent spot there. You know, some teams, like I look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they've drafted really well, and they've got all these guys they have to pay and still haven't paid them all. But they paid some of them, like Trey Smith and George Karlaftis recently, and that's all good. You know, Washington, I don't feel like they have like 7 or 8 young stars right now they have to pay, but certainly they're going to draft well and have some good young players that they have to take care of. You mentioned Laramie Tunsil. I mean, he's a premier left tackle, and you know he's getting up there in age a little bit, approaching 30, but he's still got some good years left. So, yeah, that's the song and dance of these negotiations, because on the player side, they'd say, "Hey, Terry's your team captain. He's not disruptive at all. He's a great teammate, class act guy in the community, and he produces on the field. What's the problem?" And you know, it's like, yeah, if you're not going to pay him, who are you really going to pay?
Yeah, totally.
But the team would say, "Hey, look, it's not that simple. These numbers are ridiculous. We're trying to reconcile that. It's going to take some time." So, and it's not time to panic, because I mean, how far do we have to week 1? I think if it gets to week 1 and this is an issue, then they got a problem. But right now, it is just, for better or worse, some good old fashioned posturing.
What is the remedy, if any, for Terry to make up these fines? Because we know that they changed it in the NFLPA, that you can't just waive it. Is there a way they can write something in the contract to give him a little extra to get this money? Like, what can he do? Or is he literally going to eat this money for as long as he holds out?
Well, that's the tough part. I mean, that's a hard thing to do. We've seen it happen in the past, and it can backfire on a player. You know, I think of Melvin Gordon, running back of the Chargers, where he ended up costing himself a lot of money holding out. Now, he was a running back.
Yep.
It's a little bit different. Receivers are more important. But there's a way to do it. Like, if you missed a lot of camp time, you know, they can build in some incentives in your contract to offset that. Yeah, I think that's sort of the logic with these things.
Okay.
But once you get the game checks, that's different. You know, I mean, Hassan Reddick last year cost himself a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no matter how good you are, it's tough to just step back in week 6, you know, and try to re-ingratiate yourself with the team. I just think this is different based on McLaurin's ability, but also just his standing with the team, and he's just too important. And you got Jayden Daniels. Like, I mean, Jayden Daniels needs this guy for better or worse, you know.
Totally.
So that's why I think over the next 6 weeks, even if it gets ugly and turbulent, you know, cooler heads will prevail eventually.
Do you think eventually he will get a deal versus just show up and just
play it out like Jamar Chase did,
and let him franchise or whatever could happen next?
I believe so. Now, It seems like the only wild card here is GM Adam Peters and ownership and front office. Like, you know, they seem to be okay embracing the uncomfortable. You know, some teams will just sign a guy because they don't want to deal with the headache, you know, but this team seems to have some resolve in this area, or else it maybe would have been done already. So that's the wild card, I would say. And look, some of the moves they made, you know, Laramie Tunsil, Deebo Samuel, those guys have already played out the most of their second contract and are coming to new environments. You probably don't have to pay those guys right away, you know, so they haven't just turned around and paid somebody blindly yet, you know, so this is a good first test for them. I'm fascinated to see where it goes.
Great stuff, Jeremy. Appreciate the time and insight.
Hey, thanks, guys. Anytime.
All right, thanks, buddy.
man.
Really appreciate it. I thank you, Jeremy. I would argue they kind of just threw money at Kinlaw. I would argue
that was free agency, though.
Fair, but they agreed free agency, but they threw.
But it wasn't
money
one of their own guys to just quell a potential headache.
Understood, but almost worse. They gave basically a bum a bunch of guaranteed money, a guy who hasn't proven anything, who hasn't lived up to expectations
because of injuries. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, who knows what? Let's hope.
They saw him as a cheaper alternative to Jonathan Allen.
And I actually like the signing, but when you got your guy who is everything, we all know his background and what Terry means to the organization in the area. and then you got a guy who's underachieved his entire career, and you give him $30 million guaranteed, and you just, kind of way above market value. I don't know.
Well, he's also 27, and he's.
I know.
I do think
He's
age has a
also
lot to
not
do.
accomplished 1/100th.
I do
Terry.
think
I would
McLaurin's agent could be a factor.
I do too.
Now, I'm looking at the NFLPA site. Buddy Baker also has another agent that's working with him, Tony Bonagura, who we haven't talked about.
Do you think Tony Bonagura is handling this one?
I
Or do you
don't
think
know.
Buddy Baker is handling
But
his
Buddy
biggest
Baker
client?
has had Darius Butler was one of his clients who's on the McAfee show, right? I don't know if he's on every day or every once in a while. So he's had other NFL clients.
Oh, for sure. I see
McLaurin's
the
definitely
list.
his biggest.
But it's by far his biggest.
Yeah.
By far the biggest deal.
Yep.
And
Well, he got him the last deal where he's making, $23 million a year.
yeah.
So, again, if you want to chime in, we've been talking about it all morning, 800-636-1067. But coming up next, we'll give you a chance to win some great prizes. We'll play some Ozzy trivia
Ooh,
in honor of
like
the great
it.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Let's go.
Good.